and now we are being recorded. Yeah, I would also first like to begin with thanking first you, Achilleas, for creating this event and inviting us for the Department of Social Anthropology of the University of the Aegean for hosting this event and giving us this space. And of course, also thank you to Adam and to Anna. So this event and publishing the books of Rae Dalven are for me part of an ongoing journey of researching, exploring, and telling the stories of my maternal ancestors, as Achilleas also mentioned. And I'm very excited to also share this fragment that we are here for with you. And before speaking more about myself and my connection with this book series, I would like to introduce Isnafi Publications. So Isnafi is a publishing house in Yanina. It started in 2003, and it has meanwhile published more than 80 books about history, philosophy, political science, presenting also different ethnical and religious minorities and immigrants in the reality and history of this place that we today call Greece. In this context, Isnafi published many books about the presence and history of Jewish people in Greece, as also Achilleas mentioned before. But unfortunately, Panos Vadeloukas, the person behind Isnafi, is still technophobic, and the virtual presence of Isnafi is still in progress and progress and progress. Panos is also here with us, but he's not showing his face yet. Yeah, so as I said, now it is possible to order those books online, the books of the series of Rae Dalven. So the name Isnafi comes from Turkish, Arabic, and it means justice. Later on, it received an additional meaning, which is guilds. In modern Greek, it has a negative connotation and means a closed group that conspires for their own profit. By calling the publishing house with this name, Panos intended to unlearn the colonial view of the European society towards Arabic and Turkish life, and to relate to the very long history of this territory actually being part of the Ottoman culture, but at the same time, an intersection of many cultures. Another reason for the name is that often Greek publishers are using names for their houses that source in ancient Greek, claiming that those represent knowledge. For Isnafi, knowledge is our common multicultural heritage. And finally, another reason is that guilds, Isnafia in Yanina, were very famous when Ali Pasha was the ruler of the places that we today call Greece and Albania. When Panos and I met more than 3 years ago, we found out that we share the interest of further investigating the historical aspect of Jewish life in this region. As Panos already had a few books about this topic that Achilleas also shortly presented before, I proposed to Panos to start a new book series called Isnafi Romaniote. The reason that we didn't name it Romaniotis as the male form in Greek is that it is important for us to introduce the narratives of different genders of Romaniote people, history, her story, and their story. As we were working towards establishing this book series, first by working with the poems of Yosef Elia, Adam approached Isnafi, telling about Dalven's plays and asking to publish them at Isnafi. We felt very lucky and of course agreed. Today, we start the Romaniote series with the first 2 volumes of a 5-book series with Dalven's 4 plays written as an autobiography about her life, and her biography written by Adam J. Goldwyn. Adam will, of course, elaborate about that. The next book, the second play, will be published in the end of 2022, and the last 2 plays in 2023. and will later on be followed with a book of selected poems written by Yosef Elia, translated into Hebrew and English, inshallah. The first two books will be available in local bookstores around Greece from July 1st, and can also be ordered worldwide in the links that I will share when I will finish introducing. I will share again the links in the chat box. So all books that we prepare are multilingual, in Greek and in additional languages like English and like Hebrew. Our idea of translating or publishing text in different languages beyond Greek is to give access to people in the Jewish diaspora to learn more about their ancestors, and also to give access to other people to learn about the variety of Jewish life in history previous to the Shoah. With the great work of Adam and Achilleas, and of course, Michalis Tolis, who did the layout, and Anna Bazooka, who designed the book's covers, we are now able to present to you Rae Dalven. I would now like to read to you a part of the prologue that I have written to the first book, which also explains my connection, my personal connection to this book series. I first came across Rae Dalven without even knowing it at the opening of one of my art school graduation exhibitions in Berlin, 2012, when I read Konstantin Kavafis' Ithaca, a poem about missing a home one could never reach. This poem was translated by Rae Dalven into English in the late 1950s, and is one of the reasons why she is still known in some circles today. A few years later, in 2018, I, like Kavafis' Odysseus, reached an old, new, discovered home when I first visited Yanina while researching an ongoing art project about the Romaniote community of Yanina. The city of Yanina, or as some write, Ioannina, Yanina, Yania, was a home to the largest Romaniote community in the world prior to the Shoah. And among its residents was my mother's family, the Levis. Rediscovering this place, I felt a deep connection to it and to my family who had lived there. It gave me an explanation for many questions I had about my identity, my sense of belonging. I perceive Dalven as a strong and representative voice of people who share hybrid identities, like Dalven does, like I do. She constantly felt the ambivalence of being both Greek and American, both Greek and Jewish, both a scholar and a woman, a civil rights activist in the USA in the 1950s and the 1960s, identities that could not peacefully coexist at the time when she was working. All these elements of Dalven's identity made her life and belonging to a community very difficult. Tracking traces of my maternal ancestors, the women of my family, I searched for the lost voices of the women of the Romaniote community. I searched for those voices in textile artworks that, as Dalven emphasizes in her plays, were part of the everyday life of the women of Yanina. I searched for those voices within the abandoned sewing machines, one of the main household objects that every family must own, in the backyard of the Kahal Kadosh Yashan synagogue in Yanina. I searched for those voices reading the poems of Yosef Elia, which Dalven translated into English. Only later did I find more links. My great-grandfather, Asher Moisis, was the first to publish Yosef Elia's poems in Greece in 1918. And Dalven remains the only translator of Elia's poems into English. Furthermore, Dalven has translated one of my great-grandfather's works, which is called History and Legend Concerning the Wailing Wall, from 1968 into English. So thank you very much. I am now again putting the links for the online purchase of the books in the chat box, and I will put myself on mute. Thank you.
Thank you, Adi. And Anna, אני אומר לך ערב טוב, and now you may continue as you wish.
ערב טוב Achilleas, ערב טוב Adam, ערב טוב Adi, kalispera, and good evening. And if it's morning for you, Adam, then that too. Thank you, everyone, for inviting me to talk about my Romaniote American, Rae Dalven, author of Marriages Are Arranged in Heaven, and which Adam will obviously talk about later. My part in this presentation is a rather subjective angle. It comes from someone who was lucky to meet Rae personally. What linked Rae and I belonged to the same family, the same tradition, the same faith, the same place of birth, and the same place of birth. I will try to focus on a time span that continues for a century and a half in 3 different continents and 3 maybe different generations. What else could be a more colorful braid, gaitani, as we say in Greek, of Greek, Ottoman, and Jewish elements interwoven into a carpet? What could be more Romaniote than this? The first significant for me time, can you hear me? Is it okay? Yes? Okay. The first significant for me time I met Rae was in the summer of 1968 in Athens. My family had moved there from Ioannina 10 years earlier. I was 17 years old and I was about to leave all by myself and travel to Israel to improve my knowledge of Hebrew. Then I aimed to study biochemistry at the Tel Aviv University. What I knew about Rae then was that she was one of my father's first cousins from America. She was one out of an enormous family of aunts, uncles, and cousins who had immigrated from Yanina to New York at the beginning of the 20th century, some of them even earlier. I had met American relatives who had come for a short visit to the old country before Rae. They were all members of this huge Kalhamiro family, as they called themselves, Kalhamerades, as we called them. They were so different. They looked different, they behaved differently, and they spoke Greek differently. Even their English was different than that of the regular Americans, the ones we saw in the movies. They said kukmula instead of stamna or kanata, which means a jar. Kastravech instead of anguri, which means cucumber. Patrijan instead of melijana, or melijana, as they said, which means eggplant. And such words that are out of this world today and probably are Turkish. Our conversation with them was around the table, mostly using food related to vocabulary, while eating the big Greek meal my mother had prepared. Then they left. However, it was not like them. She kept visiting us one time after the other. She stayed for longer periods of time, always for important academic reasons. She was a university scholar. But what was most important to me and meaningful at that time was that She had first to translate the poems of my favorite poet, Constantinos Kavafis, from Greek to English. At the same time, she was very cordial, very amusing, very authentic, and very funny. There was a spark in her eyes I was very familiar with. She was almost one of us. Before I left, Rae gave me 2 books as a gift. One was an English-Greek-English dictionary, and the other, her own translation of Kavafis' poems. I Was in the Seventh Sky. Both were autographed, including best wishes for my success and self-fulfillment. The way I see that today is that this was the first bridge Rae offered me for my gift to my journey, to ease my crossing of gaps and obstacles and facilitate my journey to adulthood and independence. But let's stop for a minute and ask, who were this legendary family shared both my Rae Dalven and myself? Rae's mother, Esther Kalchamera Dalven, and my grandmother, Dina or Dinula Kalchamera Bakola, were sisters, daughters of Yeshula and Rahil Kalchamera, Rachel, born in Ioannina and married at the end of the 19th century. They raised 7 daughters and 4 sons in the following order: Matathias, Simcha, Asher, Leon, Malkula, Dinula, Esterula, Hanula, Mazalo, which means Mazal, luck in Hebrew, Elias, and Revka, Rebecca, Rivka. A family in which new babies kept coming for 26 years was something not unusual at all in those days. But having to feed so many mouths, marry of 7 daughters and provide for 7 dowries, well, this was a colossal burden. It was Opa, what have I done now?
No, we can still see you and hear you. No, nothing.
Then you can see me?
We can see you.
Nothing happened to you?
You're frozen, but we can hear you.
Yes, it's okay?
Yes, now it's good. Yeah.
Oh, all right, frozen. Frozen, it's okay.
You're not frozen anymore.
Yeah, all right. Every male member of the family had to work very hard, not only to ensure a good match for their sister, but also to give a better chance to themselves to become desirable grooms, deserving good dowries. Nobody spoke about happiness or self-fulfillment. The female members of the family had nothing to say in this business. Their role was to obey. Allow me to read a few lines from a story written by a different member of the same family called Samuel Kaplan, who was the son of one of the other sisters of Esther and Dinula, my grandmother. And that was Mazalo. Mazalo, who later became This is the minute that Yeshula Kalchameras calls Mazalo to tell her that they had found a good match for her. Come, Mazalo, come here and talk to me. There is much to talk about. We are alone and it can spill out our hearts to each other. Yeshula sat in his throne-like chair. His favorite daughter was now near him, perched on a stool and curled like a curled up bundle covered by clothes formerly worn by her older sisters. I go further down. Mazzalomo, he said, my little one, you must smile as often as possible. It will keep you beautiful. Yes, father. I will try, she whispered, as her lips pursed for a smile. But her eyes betrayed her. A cloud still hung around her, and she could feel its weight. Daughter, said Yeshua, your brothers have been talking to me about you. It is timely that they should. You are past 18 and mature beyond your years. They ask my permission and I must give my answer. Let's talk quietly and quickly so that our hearts can hear what our minds have to say. Yes, Father, was all she could say, and she resolved to hold back the tears she knew she would shed later. You remember when your brother Matthew, which is Matthew, went to Smyrna about a year ago? He told me that he spoke with his friend Castor about you, and Matthew showed it to me. Castor knows a young man, David, his name. He speaks well of him. This is his picture. Here, take it. Don't just hold it. Look at it. They want me to agree to let you to go to America. They tell me that they sent a picture of you and that Castor knows that he was pleased with it. He mailed this picture to David and urges that we accept the proposal. My heart is heavy with the burden of the problem, and you must help to lift it up. Patera was all in her trembling voice. She said, I'll do as you decide. No longer able to stem an urge of tears, the daughter sighed and cried a bit and then controlled herself. Dear father, she began, why must it be like this? I love my home. I cherish you and my brothers, sisters, and my friends, and Ma and you. I need no more for now. A few more sobs, and then she could say some more. I speak my heart. I will not say that I don't dream and hope someday that I will wed. You know your girls. Our rearing has been such that we grew up preparing for the day when we would finally find a mate and make a home and rear a family and give them all the loving care you've poured on us. Father, don't let them send me away. I love it here. Why can't it be a man near here? Why can't I keep my life near my beloved ones? Now, listen, child, he urged. Aren't you still indulging in immature romantic dreaming? Isn't it a time to look at the realities of life? You know, we live in a community of only several hundred people, and that the eligible men are few. You have met some. None is for you. Would you want me to give my blessings to a match with a boy who does not make a living? Or with a man who is 20 years your senior? He paused for a while. He saw that Mazzalo was not in good shape and added, "My darling, we have to accept our fate and make the most of it. When your mother and I met, I built the business my father started so that it eventually provided for all of us. Your brothers grew up in the business. They made a livelihood when they got married. Whether right now some were not satisfied to remain here and looked to America to make their life there, I don't know if it was right or wrong. Soon the others will find no future here, and they will liquidate the declining business and will live with many of our neighbors. The Exodus eliminates those eligible for you maidens. My dear, if your senses absorb them, can you refute this conclusion? Beloved Pateramu, I've listened attentively. I know not of these things. I only wish for now to be with you. I'll help around the house. I'll lighten burdens, do the wash. I'll help prepare the food and bake the bread. I'll work and earn my keep by scrubbing floors if you keep me here. And she began to sob as she continued. My loving brothers do not know my heart. And I will stop here, but that is telling a lot about not only Mazzalo, but all the other females of the family. And we already know, I mean, I think I told you that Mazzalo left, she married this David she never knew before, and she started giving birth to her own 7, 8, 9 children. Her name became Molly, but did that make her American? I do not know. All the 11 Kalhamiro children of Rachel and Yeshula got married and raised large families of their own, some in Ioannina or nearby, and some in America, where they started immigrating one after the other. They followed the massive wave of Greek immigration to America, heading to Lower East Side, New York. In between, I won't go into this part of immigration, which probably someone else will talk about. I can tell you about it if you ask me to. Esther and Israel Davin left Greece in 1909. Rae them left an elder brother. I'm not sure how many other children, but I know that they left one daughter in Greece because she didn't get permission. She was sick. All the Kalhamira brothers and sisters went to America. Next to Ezra Bacola, also a Romaniote who had come back to Ioannina from Alexandria, Egypt. Even the matriarch, Rachel Kalhamera, who was already a wife of Yeshula, who was already a widow, left to America with the family of one of her sons. So Dinula was left alone in Greece. A few years later, Dinah and Ezra's firstborn son, Menachem, who later became Max, left Ioannina to join the Kalhamera relatives in New York. He was only 16, and he was sent by his father to study medicine. I can imagine Rae and Menachem meeting in several family occasions. After all, there was not a big age difference between them. And they probably called each other Rae and Max. They were American, weren't they? With the exception of Max, who was in America, and my brother Dinula, who died soon after the birth of her 9th child, my father, Sion, all 27 members of her family in Greece were destined to go through World War II and the German occupation of Greece. Only 3 of them survived. The rest turned to ashes in the death camps. I will not go into the details of my father's family. I'm just saying that he was one of the 3 who survived. And the other one was one of their sister, Beatrice, Bimbo, as they called her, who later had to cope with this name one for a few years, and a nephew, son of Yeshula's second of Ezra, my grandfather's that survived, was called Salvatore, the Savior. Okay. Among the Holocaust survivors, Rae met when she first visited Greece after the war, and whose personal stories were the first raw material used in her writings. There were only, as I said, 3 family members that survived. And one of them was my father, Sion Bacolas. Now, there was also a great age difference between brothers and sisters and nephews and granddaughters, and because each one of them was born in a different generation. Okay, I was at the age of my nephews and my nieces. We had many girls in the family, too many girls, which is a blessing to me. Now, in the early 70s, Rae came to Israel for an extended visit. She had been granted by the Jerusalem municipality a 3-month residence in Mishkanot Sha'ananim, a place where many other artists, scientists, authors were hosted for a period of 3 months. Rae was working on her research for her book, The Jews of Ioannina. Many things had happened to me since then, since the first time we met. My name had changed to Anna Gardi. I was already married to an Israeli. I lived in Jerusalem. I had already experienced my first war, known as the War of 1973, which broke up exactly a week after I had given birth to my first child, my daughter Irit. And no, I hadn't studied biochemistry. Instead, I had almost completed my BA studies in English literature, which was a subject much closer to my heart and a choice I never regretted. I was still quite immature, yet already a housewife married to a non-Greek Sephardi and a mother to a little girl. Yet there was some sort of breakthrough I had achieved. I had studied what I loved. I had met the man of my dreams, to whom I often read out poems of Kavafi in English. My marriage had not been prearranged, and there had been no bargain for a dowry. According to the Romaniote tradition, however, many relatives and friends from Greece and America sent gifts having the dowry custom in mind. I will only mention that the big package containing fabric and other textiles enough to keep the dowry seamstress busy for months were sent by two of Rae's siblings, Dr. Joseph Dalven and Amelia Dubin, and her husband Charles. Still in the 70s, I was a Greek bride in Israel after all. During the 3 months of Rae in Israel, she often visited us. She liked to sit with me in our kitchen where we talked for hours, and before leaving, she invited us to a farewell party where we academic milieu of Jerusalem. I never met Rae again in person, but my husband did a few years later in her 11 Fifth Avenue apartment in Manhattan. Not in Lower East Side and not in Bronx and not anywhere else, but Manhattan. And right in Washington Square. When my husband, judging by his own personal experience of having immigrated to Israel in his early youth from Bulgaria, commented that coming to a new country at the age of 3 was very similar to having been born there, she answered, "Oh no, not at all, not at all." Arranged marriages, immigration, old country versus the new, cultural differences, homophobia, marginalization of the different, language barriers, fugitive, exiles, refugees are all central themes in most of Rae's literary work. Thinking about it, the story of our own Romaniote family can be a series of paradigms of all the themes mentioned above. But in our misfortune and our disaster as a family that diminished, we were very lucky to be part of a very, 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 very large family in the States. They were all establishers and members of the Keilah Kedosha Yanina synagogue and community. And this is a very important, special community because they were the ones who who gave us a hand and helped in reestablishing the totally demolished communities in Greece and Yanina, of course. I miss Rae. I wish I could meet her once more. I'd like to sit with her again in my kitchen and tell her that I can speak now. I have found my voice and my identity. I have been an English teacher of literature in Israel. I love to teach poetry. I often spoke to my students about my origins, about Greece, my Romaniote community. I would tell her that now I am a volunteer at the Center of Salonika and Greece Jewish Communities Heritage Center in Israel, trying to keep the memory of who we were alive. I often turn to her invaluable to me book, and there hasn't been not even one time that I haven't found the answer I was looking for in it. She taught me all I should have learned from my parents and their generation, which had been so brutally cut off from the beloved ones and their past. And unfortunately, they couldn't talk to us about it. I have to be their voice now for my children and granddaughters. Rae was a mentor and a bridge over troubled water for me, and I thank her for that. I like to thank you too, Achilleas, Adi, and Adam, for giving me the opportunity to be here with you and tell you about it. Thank you.
Ευχαριστούμε πολύ. We thank you for this wonderful announcement. And I hope we will discuss on this more next. And now it's Adam's turn. And Adam, you may begin.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation, Achilleas, and for Adi, and for a really heartwarming talk on. I never had the chance to meet Rae Dalven, so even though I've done so much research and in a way I feel like I know her, it's really moving for me to hear from someone who actually did. So I'm going to share my screen for a little PowerPoint, and I'm just going to assume that you, unless Adi or Achilleas starts yelling at me. So we've heard
now there is an internet connection problem, I think.
Δεν μπορείς να μου ακούεις.
I can see and hear you.
Okay. Maybe
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Go on. Adam.
So as we've heard, Rae was famous in the US and in Greece as a translator, most famously of Constantine Cavafy, but also of many other Greek poets, including Ianos Ritsos, and the author or translator of several anthologies, including Modern Greek Poetry and Daughters of Sappho, collection of modern Greek women writers. But as we've heard, Dalven was not just a Greek woman, but a Romaniote, an ancient sect of Jews who had lived in Greece for over 2,000 years. Like many Jewish families of her generation across Europe, hers immigrated to New York in 1909. And I hope you can see here across, and on the right, the list or manifest of alien passengers for the United States. And I've zoomed in on the bottom, you can see Dalian, which is what their family was called before their name was changed in the US, Esther, Milia, Yosif, and at the bottom, Rachel, Rae Dalven. Much of Rae's scholarly life, particularly after World War II, was devoted to preserving the memory of the Jewish communities that had been destroyed in Greece and documenting the immigrant experience of those who came to New York. Her 1990 book, The Jews of Ioannina, was the culmination of a lifetime of scholarship and research on this subject. What is perhaps less known, and what I'm excited to talk about and see these books come published today, is that Dalven thought of herself as a translator second and a scholar third, almost as a playwright. In a letter of November 8th, 1948, to Basil Vlavianos, an Athenian-born lawyer, she writes, "As I wrote you at present, I am teaching English in high school. This, I hope, will be temporary. I am determined to appear as a playwright, which is my rightful heritage. Anyone who knows me and values my creative writing knows that I will perish if I do not arrive as a playwright, an original writer in my own right. Up to now, I have been a servant to Greek literature, and I hope I have served Greek writers well. This was my aim. As a Jew, I take great pride in the service I am offering Greek poets, for I am the first one in the world who has presented in English the beautiful poetry of 44 poets of the last 125 years of modern Greece. But now I must appear as a playwright as well." Dalven, however, never arrived as a playwright in her own lifetime. Instead, she left a ghostly paper trail that I stumbled upon by accident while researching her cousin by marriage, the Romaniote poet Yosef Elia. In January of 2014, I went to NYU to see if I could find some of her correspondence with Elia. And though I didn't find any letters in the archive, and I actually made a little mistake here. Sorry. Oops. This is what I found, a stack of documents that look like this. So she was working on her scholarly work, and you can see on the right side of the right side, it says Balkan Home Life by Lucy Garnett, and she was taking handwritten notes for her scholarly work. But what she was, what you can see on the left, a typescript like this. And I kept wondering to myself, what is this typescript that I keep seeing? And it was just fragments because she was just using the backside as scratch paper. So I was able to sort of sort them out into various pieces to sort of get the outlines of a couple of plays. The problem was the plays existed only in fragments, and I couldn't always figure out what went where. And this was especially complicated by the fact that Dalven was a serial rewriter, as you can see in these slides. So on the left, This is from The Crisis, a literary magazine published in 1953. Other recent campus activities include presentation of the original play Tula, written by Rae Dalven. So that's 1953. And on the right is a letter from 1981. I have taken Dr. Vlaviano's suggestion to make a minor revision on a play which I now call Tula. So she was working on this play between 1953 and 1981. Obviously, she did many other things in between.
Adam,
but there are many,
want,
almost all of her plays.
Sorry, you can change the image so we can see the crisis.
Can you not see it?
Cover. I don't see it. Now I see it.
Okay, I'll just do this.
Thanks.
This might be a little easier. So you can see here on the left, the crisis article, and on the right, the letter she wrote to Basil Vlaviano, that she wrote to Nicholas Kapellaris in 1981. So she spent many years working on this. And she changed the play's name multiple times. And the play has its origin here in a letter of 1948. And if you see the middle paragraph, I wonder if I might ask you at this time, she writes to a publisher, if you think the Saturday Review would be interested in a short story about Jewish heroism during the German occupation. When I was in Greece last May, Greek Jews told me several stories of their sufferings. I have a number of these, some from people who returned from concentration camps, others who hid in Greek homes or in the mountains with the National Liberation Front. So she had the idea to start with this as a series of short stories before moving on to thinking of them as a play. Fortunately, I eventually discovered that Dalven left a copy of her plays with the United States Copyright Office. And in 2018, I was able to get permission from her nephew, Louis Dalven, and from Yeshiva University, with special thanks to Shulamit Berger, who I saw is on the Zoom today. So thank you, Shuli, who owned the copyright to her plays. So that was what enabled me to get the complete texts of the plays that that Rae had submitted to the government for copyright purposes. In total, there are 4. Marriages Are Arranged in Heaven, which follows the arranged marriages of 3 sisters in Ioannina in the 30s. A Matter of Survival, which follows a family of Greek Jews during World War II, with some being deported and some hiding and some surviving. Our Kind of People and Esther shift the action to an immigrant in the Lower East Side of New York. In the former, a young girl tries to get an education while her family presses her to get married and go to work. In the latter, set in the post-war period, the family has grown up and follows the various siblings as they move to Long Island, buy houses, and become middle-class Jews. So these are all sort of deeply autobiographical plays. And though they're all separate, they all stand on their own. They constitute a kind of intergenerational dramatic cycle stretching across the 20th century, representing the most sustained depiction of Greek Jews, both in Greece and in America. As importantly, by foregrounding women's experiences and voices and centering women's relationships, Dalven's work must also be seen as part of the broader feminist project. Marriages Are Arranged in Heaven, for instance, takes place in Ioannina between 1929 and 1939 and centers on 3 sisters, Esther, Amelia, and Rachel. And as we've heard, these were the names of Dalven's own ancestors, and how the most intimate decision of their lives, their marriages, were affected by the broader economic and social contexts of the Romaniote community, and even the international and geopolitical contexts of war in the Balkans and of immigration policy in the United States. As a writer of memory plays, Dalven set the play at a time and place of great significance. Ioannina, her parents' hometown and the center of the Romaniote community that existed for 2,000 years in the Balkans. And the play thus represents the community on the eve of its destruction. And the agonizing dramatic irony of the play is that the audience knows the awful fate that virtually all of these characters will suffer. The Shoah hovers as an almost ominous, invisible, silent character over the play. As the play opens, Esther returns to the family home in tears from the port city of Patras, where she had been denied in her attempt to emigrate to the United States. She tells her family, first, they told us we would both have to have drops in our eyes for 2 weeks before we could be cured. She has trichoma, a common eye disease. When that was over, we got ready to leave again. Then they told us America was closed. This actually happened to Rae Dalven's older sister in 1909. And her sister was not able to rejoin the family for 3 years. While this is sad for Dalven's sister, it was a kind of personal setback. By changing the setting of the play to the 1930s, Dalven transforms this moment. The play's post-war audience knows that it is effectively a death sentence, since about 85% of Greek Jews died in the Shoah. Dalven weaves the unspoken historical tragedy into the play, focusing on the personal dimension and the dramatic. By a stroke of luck, a rich suitor, who her father and brother describe as a fine fellow who has piles of money and is very generous, expresses interest in her. If she marries him, her father says, and this is in the play, none of us will have to worry about money anymore. And we heard again previously about from Anna about the importance of the dowry. So here is potent dramatic irony again. The family thinks they won't have to worry about money because their new in-law is rich. The audience, however, knows that this community will be gone, mostly destroyed within the next 3 to 5 years. Interwoven within this historical background is the particular plight of the Romaniote women. Dalven structures the scene such that the marriage is praised by the men, the father and her brother. However, Esther, the bride-to-be, wonders aloud if she is too young. She says, I'm too young to marry. And her father replies, young, your mother was 10 when she was engaged to me and 17 when she was married. This admission is shocking to his daughters and certainly more so to the play's 20th century audience. On hearing that her new husband will be much, much older, Esther says, Israel the butcher, he's old and I don't love him. I don't love him. Her father and brother become more aggressive. Her brother Moses says, shut up, listen to me, baby's telling us what to do, chicks giving advice to roosters. And later the stage direction says, he gets up menacingly to say, if I hear another word out of you, I'll strangle you, I'll break you in two. This is her own brother when she's saying she doesn't want to get married to this much older man. So for the women, marriage is a kind of servitude and misery, while for the men, it's a path to economic security. In that Esther and Israel are the name of Dalven's parents, and in real life, they too, it's tempting to think that this was either her mother's actual reaction to hearing the news or how Dalven might have imagined her mother to have responded. As in all her autobiographical and historical plays, Dalven depicts Greek Jewish life through the eyes of female protagonists. The men in her plays represent the patriarchal forces which suck the joy and, as importantly, agency out of women's lives. This experience was deeply personal for Rae Dalven. The play Our Kind of People takes place in the Lower East Side of Manhattan on Eldridge Street, where Rae herself lived and the play is set between 1918 and 1926. And we're lucky to have a still photo that was sent to me by the actor Jane who played one of the characters in this play. So you can see what it looked like when it was staged. The main tension of the play is that the main character, Anna, a stand-in for Rae Dalven, wants to go to college, but her father doesn't want her to. He wants to get a job. So here's a short scene that sort of focuses this. Avram says, you went for your work, and at this point, Anna is 14 years old. The character's 14 years old. Did you go for your working papers? Anna, no. Avram, the father, no. What do you mean, no? Don't we say when you're 14, you will leave school and take a full-time job? Anna, I'm not. This emulates Dalven's own arguments with her father. Like the character in the play, Dalven was allowed to continue her education by day if she worked by night. She told an interviewer in 1991, I began to earn my own way really quite well at the age of 14 because I worked on all the machines. This is all the sewing machines that Adi talked about earlier. Single machine, double needle machine, narrow machine. And I was making a good salary, but I didn't enjoy high school. I wanted to be with my classmates. I wanted to stay in school. On the surface, the narrative is the typical story of a poor immigrant family trying to make it in New York. But on another level, it's a story about how patriarchal values frustrate women's ambitions and women's attempts to regain their agency. In real life, in order to escape the stifling environment of her father, Dalven married a relatively wealthy furrier named Jack Negrin, also a Romaniote. However, as she related to an interviewer in 1991, he told her, when a play of hers is produced on campus, he says, if you're famous after this, I don't want to know you. So even her husband was impeding her desire to be a playwright. The couple divorced and Rae never remarried. Nor did Rae get any help from her even more famous professional acquaintances. In a letter of February 4th, 1948, to the future Nobel laureate George Seferis, whose work Rae had translated into English, George Katsimbalis, another sort of prominent Greek writer and scholar, wrote, I think things have started getting dangerous. Oops, let me zoom out a little bit, you can see. I think things have started getting dangerous and there should be some sort of barrier. After that, Elena Hebreo Americana, woman who is announcing in the newspapers that she is preparing, and will soon be publishing a modern Greek anthology translated in English. And I saw your name in there. The implication is clear, emphasized by the long compound word, both because of her nationality, or rather multinationality, and her gender, and her religion. Katsimbalis warns his friend not to allow Dalven to translate his works. He repeated the sentiment in a letter of December 12th. Modern Greek poetry suffers when it is soiled by Helleno-Hebreo American kukuines, commies. So whether it was her father demanding she drop out of school, her husband telling her if she became successful as a playwright, he would divorce her, her all-male professors at the Yale School of Drama writing her negative job recommendations, or the poets whom she translated giving up on her once famous, her reflect her lived experience as a woman held back in a world that was anti-immigrant, anti-woman, anti-Semitic, and anti-poverty, right, because she was poor. And here you can see that visually. This is an image, and I can zoom in again a little bit, I think, from Pace University, where she was a professor for a few years, from 1966. And you can see that she's the only woman on the faculty on the page that she appears. Katsimbalis meant Helleno-Hebreo Americana as a pejorative, but I chose it for the title of the biography because I believe her into lives like hers, lived on the margins, lives lived at the intersections of identities. Dalven never gave up on her dream. In 1991, a year before her death, she told an interviewer that she wanted to travel once more to Greece, quote, to say goodbye to all my poets. And then I want to concentrate, whatever life is left in me, on writing my plays. If I can write more than one, more. But I'd very much like to write a play. She never got the chance. Sometime in late July 1992, Jenny Sterlin, an actor who had worked with and befriended Rae in her later years, went to visit her in the hospital. In a journal entry from later that day, she paints an intimate portrait of the aging playwright in her final days. The little girl inside the older woman shines through, her intense desire to achieve her heart's desire to see her play brought to fruition. She travels everywhere by bus. She lives at the beginning of Fifth Avenue downtown. She made the effort to see the play at Planet Hollywood, coming and returning by bus late at night. Oh, an undaunted spirit. She still has so much to do. She spoke to me 2 days ago saying, I'm going to the doctor tomorrow. Did she leave it too late? 2 days later, Sterlin returned to the hospital. And this is sort of, if you can see my arrow over here on the bottom right side, Monday, July 27th. Rae Dalven died in the middle of the night, alone with pipes going in and out, her skin stretched over her face, her arms bruised with the constant jabbing of needles by technicians. No one by her side because we weren't relatives, only friends. No one was called. This woman who gave so much left like a pauper. The bureaucracy that denies us our human rights relegated this poor woman to the ranks of disposed, and we call ourselves civilized. 4 days ago, she invited me to her home for coffee and cake. Today she is dead. What amazes me is that Sterling could not have known that this is also how Rae viewed herself. In 1948, Dalven had written a letter to the American publisher William Rose Burnett. Imagine a human being with radiant, tingling and radiant with life, with the strength of the soil, eyes forever brimming with the wonder of childhood, sensitive to the suffering of others, tuned to the voices of nature. I have seen myself like this when studying for the theater. Unlike Jenny Sterling, I never met Rae, but over the course of my research, this is how I have come to see her too. 75 years have passed since she wrote the letter that you see on the screen, and 30 years have passed since she died. And now, because of Adi Liraz and Panos Vadaloukas at Isnafi Publishing, I hope the rest of the world will have a chance to see her like that too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adam, for that speech. It was really helpful to understand about Rae Dalven and about the title of the book and the book presentation. Now, before we start the discussion, we open the discussion. Does Rena want to share some thoughts?
I would talk on the play itself, because of course all the other, I'm not a panelist to start with, haven't conducted any research on Rae Dalven, and I was very glad to hear the panelists elaborate on her life, because biography and autobiography is very connected to one's work, and it interests me. So once the discussion is going to start on the play itself, then I would have to say a few things. Or I can introduce them now. To me, it makes no difference. I read the play.
Why not?
The one that's published.
If you want, sorry, Rena, for interrupting. If you want, you can open your camera also.
Oh, okay.
Whatever you like.
No, I don't mind. Once I read the play, I was interested to find out what was happening to the corresponding surrounding of the Jewish community in Ioannina and the one in Salonika, that is the non-Jewish community. And I read and found originally two texts, one by Konstantinos Theotokis, "Η τιμή και το χρήμα," which is on the subject of arranged marriages, which is the title in English would be Honor and Money. And another one by Alexandros, then he's a very known author. He is the one who wrote the Iphonissa. Anyway, I will remember soon his...
Papadiamandis.
Sorry?
Papadiamandis.
Papadiamandis, exactly. And I wanted to compare what is different and what is similar, because I know that in certain customs, there are not frontiers. Even though people are separated into religious groups, there's still half of their identity is Greek or Romaniote or Ioannoti. So what I found out is that these two authors, the only ones that deal with this subject, as far as I know, are also, how should I say, feminists in many ways, in that they condemn arranged marriages, that and dowries, they go together. Konstantinos Theotokis recounts a story about a couple that falls in love, but then they elope. That is, the girl is taken away and goes to live with her man she's in love, because the issue of dowry emerges, and there is no way that her family can come up with this dowry, as it happens also in Rae Dalven's play, that they're in constant agony if they will meet the requirements of a dowry. I won't tell the whole story, which means they share the same anxiety. The difference is that the girls in the Jewish story comply at the end, whereas the girl in the non-Jewish text, it's not a play, does not go along with the dowry thing, even when the man she's enamored with gives up on the dowry. That's why I say it's a feminist author, an early feminist author. But the same is with Alexandros Papadiamandis in Phonissa, where the heroess is a lady, a woman who gives an account on the slavery of women, that from the moment they're born, they have to constantly be useful and serve the men in their surrounding or in their environment, and goes on to kill all the female babies to spare them the trouble of having a slave life. That's very interesting, because in a minority such as the Jewish one, and the women that participate in it, even though they have the same, how should I say, rejection towards arranged marriages and the issue of dowry, they comply at the end. The non-Jews do not comply and condemn in one way or another. However, in Salonika, which is the main Sephardic community, and there are reasons to compare the Yanniot Jewish community with Salonika, the Sephardim, and the Romaniote, there are very, very small differences, such as, I didn't see it mentioned, though it could be common practice in Ioannina too. The exhibit of the dowry described in Rae Dalven's play, and the counting of all the items on material dowry other than the monetary dowry, because both are important, is that during the exhibit in Salonika, where the groom also participates, and the preciadores, or otherwise the appreciators, the ones that come and check as representatives of the community before the marital contract is written and approved, must raise a sum of a percentage on the monetary dowry given, which will be given to the poor girls. That is, it is like a tax raised while a middle class or a bourgeois girl is going to be married, and this tax, the groom who gets the money from the bride will have to pay to the community on account of the poor girls. There's another issue, and I think I should give the floor to Rabbi Gabriel Negrin, because he knows more about it to elaborate, which I read, and I think it's a mistake in the book, where it is written, I don't know by whom is the text signed, that in Yanina there was no divorce, no case of divorce, get in Hebrew, as the famous film also is called, because there was only engagement and there was no betrothal. That, I think, is wrong, and I think the floor should be given to Rabbi Gabriel Negrin, who could go into detail, because it is more or less his field. So I'm done, and I'm turning off. I'm done for the time being, and I can turn off my microphone.
Okay, thank you, Rena. If Rabbi is here, he's welcome to intervene.
Hello to everybody. Thank you for the beautiful introductions in English. I hope you can hear me. So thank you also, Rena, for introducing me. Well, as you understand, Alaphically speaking, it was going to be a big mess if they had no need of a get in Yanina, which we obviously know that they did had weddings because of the issue of Eshet Is and Mamzerim afterwards. Though a very interesting proof of having gets, having divorces in Jewish divorces in Yanina is one of the Shadayot, one of the tafsitim, one of the silver plates that you could find in the synagogue. If I'm not mistaken, it was from Chal Kadosh Chadash, from the new synagogue, that a lady is giving it as a present from the money of the ketubah, which means that she was divorced and she was paid afterwards the money of the ketubah, and from that money she is thanking God for remarrying. So we know that it was a get, and we know it was a new ketubah. So yes.
Okay. I didn't hear all that because of the voices in the background. I don't know if it was better for you, the sound.
Shall I repeat? Because I think I understood most of what was said. That
Okay, yeah, you're welcome.
So that what Rabbi Negrin said, that there are the shadayot around, which are hanged, hanged around the parochet at the synagogue, and he said that one of them was actually from the Kahal Kadosh Chadash, the new synagogue, the second synagogue in Ioannina, and it was donated and actually produced from the money that the bride received after she got divorced from the contract of the ketubah. So after she got divorced, she received this money, and from this money she produced the shedaya. Is this the singular word? This object, which is, I think, mostly made out of silver and is hanged around the parochet at the synagogue. And this is a proof that actually, yes, there were also divorces in Yanina. I hope that I understand. Yeah, so I was correct in what I've heard. Thank you very much for elaborating about this very important information.
Thank you, Adi. There's a short question in the Q&A section. Deborah Price asks, probably, Adam, what did she teach at Pace in Rae Dalven? What subject did she teach at Pace University? Pace
Yes.
College?
Yeah, she taught at Pace University. She taught English, and most of her teaching was in English. And occasionally, the dream that she had was to teach drama. And eventually, she left Pace University to take a permanent position at Ladycliffe College, which is a little bit north of New York City and doesn't exist anymore. But that's where she held a permanent position in English and drama. So those were mostly the subjects that she taught.
Thank you, Adam. We want to continue on dowries and arranged marriages in heaven, or move to a next issue. I think this is one of the most interesting topics in these books, which I didn't mention, but I've already have them on my hands. I feel lucky about that. So volume 1 is this, and I can't show it properly from this camera, but marriages are arranged in heaven. And I think this is quite interesting because it is an understudied subject in Greek history. From the little I know, we don't have a history of dowry, which is pretty weird, it's pretty peculiar, because this was the material background of marriages for like 160 years. I mean, until 1982, if I'm not wrong, dowry was, when the law changed, dowry existed. And I would say that, okay, there are not dowries anymore, and this ritual around dowries and the typical stuff, but marriages still happen in an directly or indirectly arranged way. I mean, people from certain social classes will marry usually to people from certain particular social classes. So, okay, things like that can change from one day to another, but there are no dowries for 40 years now, which is not that much since we had it for 160 years. And since the Greek state was celebrating last year its 200 years of existence, it is, I think that point was missing, on the level of social history, that there is no proper study of this institution. We should thank some anthropologists, since we are here now in the hosted, by the university, by the Department of Social Anthropology and History, that have studied and produced some research on dowries. I want to mention Nora Skouteri, one of the first women in gender studies in Greece, Anthropology of Dowry. But then, well, I'm not an expert, but I don't know if we have many studies after that, after the 80s, early 90s. However, we have, and this department has some production on research on kinship studies and family studies in a broader way. Asula Romaniote, also a historian who excels in women's history, published last year a book on civil war, approaching the issue from the perspective of oral history, and she devoted something like 10 pages in her book on dowry, conducting interviews with people in rural Kardica, etc. I don't know. What do you say? We can move to another field also. Rena has done some work on.
Sorry,
yeah.
I just see that there is another question in the question and answers window. If you want, I don't know if you saw it. I didn't mean to disturb you. Just I'm not sure if you saw that there is another.
No, go on. You can read it if you want.
Yeah. So Rita Baruch wrote, as a dissident of Rae extended family, I would love to contribute a comment. I knew Rae Dalven and her valiant effort. Could I speak briefly? So, yeah. If I'm not sure how to, yeah.
Hello? Oh my gosh, this is very thrilling. I found out at 1 a.m. on my email that this was happening. I had no idea, and I'm just deeply moved. It was a fluke that I saw it. And I'll say briefly, you know, the themes you are discussing are literally parallel for my family and resonate very deeply for my own life as an independent, educated woman. I grew up in New York City, and my family, my father, Marvin Baruch Matthew, was son of Rachel and Benjamin, and Rachel was the eldest daughter. I won't focus on the genealogy, but she was the eldest daughter and came to the United States first with her brother Jess. And one thing that's really poignant, when she arrived, she came before the rest of her family at age 13, I believe. And she had studied in Yanina, and she had studied with the Alliance Française. So she was very smart. And she arrived and was enrolled in school, and she came home late one day, and her uncle said, "That's it, you're never going back." And he took her out of school and put her behind a sewing machine. And it breaks my heart, you know. So this is hitting me on a lot of levels. I've been very interested in the history and trying to understand. I'm the eldest daughter and one of the 2 eldest cousins in our extended family. And I am Rachel as well. All the girls were named Rachel because we follow the traditional Yanina naming customs, which I'll mention because it's relevant here, I think. So the first girl of each family must be named after the paternal fluke, Freudian slip, the paternal grandmother, who was Rachel Colchamiro. And the boys in each of my cousins' families were named after the paternal grandfather, which was Benjamin, or actually he was Baruch in Greece. So we have this, I feel this very direct link, and 3 of us, my grandmother, Rae Colchamiro, called us the 3 Rachels. And she was very, what I think is relevant, she was very much, her life was really formed by the fact that she had to leave school. It ended her formal education, and she became self-taught after that, but she never worked outside the home. And I think she was always resentful of that, and it really shaped her life. But as far as Rae, you know, I knew of Rae through the Sisterhood of Yanina, which was New York City. And although I had broken the mold by moving away to go to college and kept moving west, I would go back to New York City whenever I could, and I would go to Kahila Kadosha Yanina. And I know the people there, and I tried to stay as close as I could to the extended family. And in fact, I told some of my cousins about this, and I don't know if they're on, but I will share with them. And as far as what I think is important, though, is the Sisterhood of Yanina was certainly Rae Dalven was a member, and I knew about her partially through Mildred Kofina, who was very active in the Sisterhood. And I remember hearing about Rae's efforts to get her book published, The Jews of Yanina. And she wanted, and this, I mean, it's so true what you were saying. Adam, you really got it. You really understand her, and I'm deeply grateful. She was frustrated because she wanted support from that association in the publishing, and they were reluctant. She was different. You know, the others led traditional lives in their marriages and children as the center of their lives. And she was an intellectual, and she did it differently. And I was very struck by that. To me, she was the only person in the family that I saw as a role model. And I connected with her. I actually went to visit her in her home on Fifth Avenue. And I remember going in, and of course, many bookshelves, and immediately she, mainly wanted to show me her books. And I think, and I have a number of them here in my home in Richmond, California. And she was, she struck me as very centered and grounded in her life work, which is all that you're talking about, of course. And I think another tension for her was that she wasn't more warmly embraced by the community, because I don't think they understood her lifestyle choice, and I just thought that was so unfortunate. And I mean, I think I spent many, many years of my earlier life trying to break from or rebelling from that, the patriarchal aspects of that family. But I mean, I was second generation. So anyway, it was all that you're discussing was still very present. And it took me and my cousins to kind of push the boundaries. But it was such a close community. The community was very enmeshed, and really, like people seemed in the New York City community. I mean, there was a lot of joy, there was a lot of celebration, there was a lot of singing. My whole childhood was singing and eating Greek food. But there was pain under the surface, and there were troubles that weren't discussed, and it did lead to some tragedies. So I found it a real dichotomy, I grew up thinking everyone was Greek Jewish. I just thought I was blessed to have a double culture, I didn't know that wasn't the case till I left New York City, which was a shock. But I'm sorry, I'm going on a little, but this was a rare opportunity. Lastly, I tried to jot down some notes as everyone was speaking. No, I mean, I think it's fabulous that these books are coming out, and I think she'd be absolutely delighted. She truly was a trailblazer, and one of a kind, and and the first. And I only wish she had had more support. But the Sisterhood of Yanina did at least purchase a lot of her books, and I remember being gifted one by Mildred Kofina. So I'll stop here, but if there's, I also, last thing, I have a packet. They did a special called Chamiro Family what did I call it? It was a museum exhibit and a lot of programs at Kehila Kadosha, and I have a copy of everything. So if there's anything that you don't have and you want sent, let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita, for this. Anna would like to say something. I think she raised her hand. Oh no, you are muted. If you want to.
Anna, you are muted. You need to unmute yourself if you want to talk. We can't hear you.
Okay, thank you again for helping me. I just want to go back to the dowries issue. I remember my father said, I know from my father, when he came back to Yanina after the war, and there were so few males that could start again this community and take care of all the girls. One of the first worries was someone to give dowries to this girl. Okay.
There's a problem in the connection.
Okay, should I stop?
No, but yeah, I don't know if we can do something. We're not hearing everything you're saying.
I don't know either.
If you want to please repeat what you started.
No, it's okay. Okay.
Let's move. There is a request that you will repeat. So if you could please try again to repeat what you said.
Oh, well, I can't manage well the computer. I'm also a bit of ignorant in this field, but I would say that I was trying to say that one of the primary worries of in the first moments of reconstructing the community of Ioannina was to find money to give dowries to the unmarried girls who had stayed all alone. And that's actually when they gave them, they asked for the sewing machines back, and each woman was given a sewing machine. You had mentioned that in the beginning, to be because all of them knew how to sew, and why they learned to do that? Because they had to prepare their dowries, and that was an income for them. That would be an income for them, and the greatest of all fears was that they would end up in brothels, because there was no way to give them what they needed. And this is one thing. And the other thing about my father, I know that he came back, and when he realized that he was the only survivor in Greece, the first thing he wanted to do, and knew it was his duty, was to help his sister Bimbo to marry off her 3 daughters, who were especially the older one, who was already marriageable. And that was my father's task. He took the task upon himself because there was no one else. And that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Anna.
Welcome.
Rabbi would want to speak.
Thank you again. I hope you can hear me better now.
Yes.
But I'm just, I have a flight and it's delayed, so I'm very happy to be with you. Sorry for all the noises. I wanted to mention that the dowry, it wasn't important only because it's part of the Jewish law, but also because till 1982, if I'm not mistaken, the dowry was part of the Greek law, the part of the national law, the part of the national Greek law, which means since the national Greek law was dealing with the matters of the family, weddings, divorces, etc., etc., according to the religious tradition of every citizen. Also, if you need more reference into that, is one of the books that you can find more information is of Asher Moises about the Jewish Greek, the Jewish law into the Greek law. So it was part of the national law. They had to give a dowry, so that was very, very important.
That's right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, if I could just add, Dalven, she speaks so frequently about the dowry. In her interview, she says it ruined her mother's life. She says it ruined her life. She mentions how it was common to name girls in the community Stamata or Stamatina as a way of sort of like saying, please stop having children, like as a prayer, to name the child as a prayer to stop having more children. And in fact, she says that her mother, the reason that they went through with the marriage was because her father didn't ask for a dowry, because he was in love, if you can believe something as crazy as that. So that was one of the reasons, that was the big thing for them, is that Israel Dalyan did not require a dowry to marry her. And as I mentioned in the chat, the last lines of Marriages Are Arranged in Heaven says, luckily Greek women now don't have to do that anymore. So the dowry was one of the central facets of Dalvin's life. After.
Thank you, Adam. Pothiti Hadjarula commented that as Rabbi Gabriel Negrin said, the civil code required as a legal obligation the provision of a dowry by the father and the absence of father to mother. Pothiti is a member of the department here, a historian. And if she wants, she can also intervene.
Thank you, Achilleas and Sadi, for the wonderful presentations and comments. I don't have any question, and I haven't read the plays yet, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Pothiti. I will bring them to you. Does someone want to continue with something?
I just saw a question about Adam's writings and the play, so I'm trying now to copy paste it again, but I posted already twice the links where you can purchase the books online and they will be sent to you. I will try now to do it again. So it's in the chat box. Now again. It's already possible now to order the books on those links.
So, is that it for with the discussion? Okay then. Thank you all very much for being here and sharing these announcements and these stories and these comments, interventions. It was really nice for me, and I think for all of us. And I hope we make it possible to have a live discussion at some point in Athens, maybe in autumn, or I don't know. But we will sure read the books, and yeah, I think they will be in the bookstores around 1st of July, and that will be, I don't know about pleasant issues, but they are very well written, and you can enjoy it, all of you. Thank you again. Καληνύχτα από μένα. Laila Tov, and good night.
Εγώ ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ, להתראות.
להתראות. לילה טוב.
תודה רבה, καληνύχτα, καλησπέρα. ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ.
Καληνύχτα וכלימέρα. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Thank you.
Τέλεια. Ωραία. Μπορούμε να μιλήσουμε και τις επόμενες. We can also speak in the next days to think about further.
Να πω και εγώ ένα ευχαριστώ σε όλους. Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ και σε όσους συμμετείχαν και δεν τους είδαμε στην οθόνη, αλλά κυρίως σε όσους βλέπουμε στην οθόνη μας. Και σας περιμένω όλους στα Γιάννενα κάποια στιγμή και για βιβλιοπαρουσίαση, αλλά δεν ξέρω αν τρώτε βατραχοπόδαρα ή για ένα τσιμπουράκι έστω και να τα κουβεντιάσουμε και από κοντά.
Ωραία, τέλεια.
Ευχαριστώ πολύ.
Ευχαριστώ πάνω.
Βατραχοπόδια
δεν είναι kosher.
Α, δεν είναι.
Αλλά μπακλαβά είναι.
Μπακλαβά εντάξει.
Ωραία.
Φιλάκια, γεια σας. Ευχαριστώ.
Φιλιά. Adam, bye. Γεια σου, Αντί.
Bye. Thank you.
Ciao.